Okay, so Norm, welcome back to the show. Glad you're here, because you, my friend, happen to be the absolute perfect person to do the end of the year review with. All right, so let's just jump right into it. First, Trump is claiming absolute immunity for anything. I mean, for anything he did while in the White House. In fact, he even believes that he's entitled to absolute immunity for anything when he wasn't in the White House. And now the Supreme Court is set to decide if that's true. How do you think that the Supreme Court's going to rule?
The Supreme Court is going to deny Donald Trump's absolute immunity. Is precise, which it's a crazy thing. You know, to understand it before we get to the legalities, you have to put it in the picture, because this is the year in review. And you have to put it in the picture, Michael, of the other things he's saying. That he's going to be a dictator on day one. That he's going to seek revenge. That he is your retribution, he says to his supporters. That he's going to clean out the government. He's going to fire everybody. He's going to do what he wants, irrespective of the rule of law. We know he's going to try to pardon himself or get rid of the criminal proceedings against him. He'll probably try to pardon all the January 6th insurrectionists. They're his private army. When you put absolute immunity in there, what you realize is it's another piece of that dictatorship puzzle. He's taking us to a place that our country has never been. We broke away from the British to get away from a king, the divine right of monarchs, the absolute, there's one person who's above the law. No. The American idea is no one is above the law. The Constitution is supreme. That's what the absolute immunity is about. It's not just a legal thing. It's part of a larger picture. The Trump dictatorship that's coming if he's reelected. And let me tell you, there's a non-trivial chance he's tied or leading in the polls with Joe Biden. So we have to really think about that eventuality. But there's some good news on that front that ran through the whole year that I'm going to talk to you about and your listeners today, too.
Well, let me hear, because, again, how do you think the Supreme Court will decide this? Right? So it's you and I.
Let's do the law.
Because you and I can both agree that Donald Trump is a danger to democracy. The one thing that you also left out that Donald Trump has stated he's going to do on day one, he's going to rewrite the Constitution. He's going to destroy the tripartite system of government. I talk about it a lot on this podcast and also on Political Beatdown. I talk about it a lot on television. He wants to get rid of the tripartite system. There will be no more judiciary. There will be no more legislative branch. It's going to, all power will be conferred upon the executive branch, which at that point in time, forget about absolute immunity. That's a built-in. When you have all the power of government, you decide what is and what is not going to be prosecuted.
Well, I think the trajectory of what happens if he's reelected is more complex than that. Just like his absolute immunity is a smidge more complex. In terms of what the Supreme Court will do, now we put it in context. I'm holding on to the good news for a little bit. Let's put the absolute immunity in legal context first. Then let's talk about what 2025 might look like, what this podcast could be at the end of 2024. In terms of the Supreme Court, what Donald Trump is actually asking for is what we call Nixon v. Fitzgerald civil presidential immunity to be moved to the criminal context. Civil presidential immunity is the idea that a president is absolutely immune for anything done within his official acts, and that's defined as going right up to the outer perimeter of the duties of office. So Trump would argue in response to our claims, he'd say, well, wait a minute. I'm not saying I can do a bank robbery. That's not an official act, or a murder or a kidnapping. I'm only saying for official stuff, you can't prosecute me. The problem with that argument is that court after court, just recently, a very conservative Chief Justice of the 11th Circuit, Bill Pryor, 3-judge panel, when Meadows tried a similar argument to get his case to federal court, no.
Mm-hmm.
How can it be an official act for a president to stay in office? That's political. Trump knows that he's ultimately going to lose this argument, whatever the test is. He's playing for time, Michael. And then in terms of what 2025 would look like, if you look at his role models, and he's been open about who they are, Erdogan in Turkey, Orban in Hungary, and Putin,
and
Xi,
Kim Jong-un,
and even Kim Jong-un. If you look at his role models, they have not, and I think the most germane ones for our purposes are Erdogan, Orban, and even Putin. They didn't go all at once. They boiled the frog. So I think what you would see is, and he's not stupid. You know that, Michael. He's street smart. Trump would slowly advance, boil the frog, so he wouldn't destroy our checks and balances all at once.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you. One of the things he realizes is time as well is not on his side. And I don't mean time in terms of with all of these cases pending against him. I'm talking about life's clock, all right? But if he, God forbid, a million times wins, he'll be 80 years old when he gets into office.
Yeah.
He's not fucking around, Norm.
Yeah.
He's going straight for the gusto. His feeling is rip the Band-Aid off the wound and just do it all at once. And that's why he keeps saying everything that he's going to do on day number one. The funny thing is everybody wants to have an opinion about what Donald Trump is saying. I have a better idea for you. How about shut the fuck up and listen to what the guy's telling you that he's going to do? Now, you may say, but he can't do that, right? We have a constitution.
Yeah.
We have a court system. He can do what he wants if he does also what he said he's going to do. He's going to have loyalty pledges by everybody that works for him. And that's like 1,600 significant government positions. So if the military is on his side, don't tell me that he can't have absolute immunity if he wants to kill someone on Fifth Avenue. He most certainly can. He becomes the dictator that he legitimately wants to be, that he's telling people that he's going to be. And I don't understand why people want to be led. I mean, don't you want to live in a democracy? The whole world is fighting to become democratic. We're fighting to become socialist or communist. I don't get it. Yeah.
His unfortunately here this is what's going on. His followers, and you see this in the public opinion polls, and that brings me to the good news, because there's good news in these polls. I have a big new New York Times piece talking about it. His followers, the bad news is that Trump has got about a third of the voting age public that wants to go in a more dictatorial way. They want a leader who will discard the checks and balances. It's really an un-American idea. It's one of the greatest threats to the United States since the time of the Civil War. It's a threat from within. FDR was worried about that with the communist organizing in the United States, and there was some legitimate worry about Stalin's efforts to intrude upon America, recruit agents and whatnot. But that was only a tiny smidge of the American public ever. a few hundred thousands. FDR thought it could grow to, he was worried that it would grow. He nipped it in the bud. It's part of the motivation for the social reforms of the New Deal, to get out in front of that Soviet spirit. Trump has got 30% roughly, a little less than a third, who want to move the United States more in the direction of a dictatorship. They want a president who has more power. They're opposed to our freedoms. They're going to back him. They think they've subscribed to a set of abhorrent principles. I don't blame them. They've suffered a lot of social dislocations, and Trump is a demagogue. He's exploited that. We've known that's a danger with democracy for thousands of years, since the Greek democracy, the Roman Republic, and the Federalist Papers wrote about it. And we've seen demagogues in this country before. Trump is the most successful demagogue from within the system that we've ever seen in the history of the United States. One of the you got to go back to the Federalist Papers to understand our founders and framers saw this coming. And now this year is going to be a test, Michael. The year 2023 was prologue. The year 2024 is going to be the test. And I think if we can get Donald Trump before a jury of his peers, that the data tells us, it just wrote about this in my Times piece, there's a mountain of data that says once he's convicted, the American people definitively turn against him. Biden's lead, there's a 14-point swing. Trump goes in some polls from being 4 or 5 up to 9 down, a 14-point swing.
Could you
Incredible.
imagine? And that's convicted. Only it? But could you imagine that that's it? A guy gets convicted of a crime and he's still plus 35, 38 of the country, 40 of the country? I mean, that just really goes to show you that we're really, as a country, in very serious trouble. I mean, what would he have to do for these people to walk away? And I don't think the answer is anything, because I think the number is even higher. For whatever the reason, these Americans want to be led around like sheep. So let me ask you this then, Norm, because Trump's lawyers are arguing.
Not all, Michael. Not all.
Well, thank God for that.
The Trump followers. The Trump
followers is who I meant, yeah. So Trump's lawyers are arguing that because the Senate did not convict him during the impeachment hearings, something that you know a lot about, that he cannot now be prosecuted for election interference. Is there any truth to that claim, or is that just more bullshit coming out of his D team, set of lawyers?
Well, as usual, Michael, you have to take everything his lawyers say with a grain of salt. And that, by the way, brings us back to the need for rule of law. Of course, it's not election interference. That's garbage. I mean, you can't evade, you can't break the law allegedly, and then say, I'm running for office, so you can't prosecute me. You know what? That's even worse than the argument that he's absolutely immune, because that argument is a part of this picture of the imperial presidency. Trump wants the imperial candidacy. Well, if he didn't want to be prosecuted, he shouldn't have allegedly broken the law. And I think we could see multiple criminal trials of the former president in the year to come. We've seen 4 get possibly set up this year. Now the schedule is complicated. I don't know if we're doing the year in review or the year to come. We seem to be looking forward, Michael. The schedule gets complicated, but I think you are going to see probably at least 2 criminal trials in 2024. There's no avoiding it.
Which are the 2 that you think?
Well, we're going to see the Jack Smith case, because the absolute immunity argument is going to fail in the Supreme Court. And I think we have enough time, depending how they do it. You can't guarantee. Likely. These are all likelihoods. They're probabilities. They're odds. Likely you'll see the Jack Smith case on a 60 to 90 day delay. And do you know what that means, Michael? The Alvin Bragg case, which is so important, the 2016 election interference case, where you served jail time for your role in that, and you took on the responsibility. You did not try to evade. You did the right thing. That is an election interference case. You pled guilty to campaign finance violations. And that's why I think you'll be such a compelling witness. That case is going to go to trial on March 25th, I believe.
Oh, that's going to trial. There's no doubt about that. You know, everybody keeps talking about, including Donald. He put out a thing the other day, and he declared a victory. It says declared victory in regard to the delay of the Jack Smith, the Tanya Chutkin case, right? The Georgia case.
Yes.
I mean, he's calling it a victory. I don't understand, nor do I see the victory he's referring to. All you did is change the schedule. So the fact that that case might be delayed from what was supposed to be March 4th start date to June, maybe July, right? All that means is that Alvin Bragg is going to go first instead of second. It's not like there aren't 4 cases that are waiting for him, and maybe even 5 soon. But the part of my question that really is perplexing to me, is the fact that his lawyers believe that an impeachment hearing is a criminal proceeding.
That's bizarre.
I mean, I don't understand what they're talking about. So how can an administrative proceeding, which is what the impeachment hearing is, how could they possibly look at that and say, well, you didn't convict me on an administrative level, so therefore you can't convict me or even try me on a criminal matter?
This is one of the most bizarre arguments in the whole weird panoply. And you know, his lawyer, John, and I practiced criminal defense law together, so I know John well at the Zuckerman Spader firm where I was a partner, worked for 20 years before my detour into government. I never went back to making money, Michael. Haven't made a penny since 2008. Practicing law. Fortunately, I found 1 or 2 other things to do. So Lauro has made this. He's very audacious. You have to be when you're a criminal defense lawyer. They make 2 arguments. One, it's an argument. It's wrong, but it's legit. The other, as you point out, is nuts. The legit argument is, okay, do you have absolute immunity for what you did as president within the outer perimeter under Nixon Fitzgerald? The answer is no, almost certainly not. But, you could ask. You're not going to get thrown out of court for asking. But the other argument is that the Constitution says that you can only be executed as a former president if you were tried and convicted at the impeachment trial in the Senate. And otherwise, the impeachment trial blocks if you're acquitted. It's a kind of double jeopardy argument, a criminal argument. But these are 2 totally different proceedings, and the words of the Constitution make it clear. The Constitution says that if you're tried at impeachment, nevertheless, you can be subject to criminal. It doesn't say only if. It says nevertheless. They're taking the meaning of the words and turning them upside down to make this double jeopardy argument. I'll tell you why they're doing it. Because if you have a double jeopardy case, you get a stay. But here the double jeopardy argument is so weak and frivolous and phony and false that I don't think Judge Chutkin should have given Donald Trump a stay. She should have proceeded with everything up to jury selection, everything up to swearing in the jury.
But Norman,
because there's no double jeopardy.
Right, that's the point. That there is none, and the impeachment hearings, they're political. They're not pretty. I mean, you put on the case as if this was a criminal trial, but it's political. There was no way that a Republican Senate was going to vote to convict. I mean, it was determined in advance. So yeah, the whole argument to me is just stupid. And I was less than impressed with John Lauro, to put it mildly. But
he's a clever guy. He has stalled. He has stalled the proceedings. Michael, there's only a couple dozen living American lawyers who've ever litigated an impeachment trial, and you're talking to one of them.
Well, that's
true.
But
they're a funny combination of legal and political, but they're certainly not criminal. The Constitution does not say that you get a criminal pass if you're acquitted. It's a made-up, audacious, ridiculous argument. It's there to try to get a stay. It's not going to work. Trump is doing what he does best. He's playing for delay.
Exactly. But, Norm, I guess this last Saturday, Trump asked a federal appeals court to rule that he's immune from prosecution. This is great, because he was acting within his role as president when he pressed claims about alleged fraud and irregularity in the 2020 election. I mean, talk about absurdity, right? What do you think that we should expect there?
Well, this filing that he made is part of the rocket docket in the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals, hearing Chutkan's ruling that Donald Trump does not have absolute immunity. And I think, a lot of people focused on the fact that the Supreme Court wasn't willing to leapfrog. Jack Smith said, hey, like in U.S. v. Nixon, you should leapfrog the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court said, not so fast. The Court of Appeals is going very quickly. They've set a hearing for January 9th. We want to see the briefing. We want to see what they decide. Refusing to leapfrog was a kind of like the Supreme Court putting in a bid, an application for insurance policy, because if they are merely affirming two lower courts, that's much safer than them intruding. So it was okay for Smith to try. It was okay for them to say, we're going to go a little slower.
By the way, I think it was the right decision. I really think it was the right decision, not to leapfrog.
Yeah.
I know that we all want to move this. In fact, when somebody brought this up to me and said to me, the Supreme Court, that's because they're in Trump's pocket. First of all, they're not in Trump's pocket. I think it was the right decision. I think it was the right decision, and I'll tell you why. Because there is a procedure that needs to be followed, and I think they were doing, personally, I think that they did the right thing. That's just, again, that's just if we wanted to move this case forward faster, Merrick Garland should have brought the case faster. They should have had a special counsel appointed a year earlier. The same thing I could even say with Alvin Bragg, right? When he was told by Mark Pomerantz, let's go. We got the fucking goods, dude. Let's go.
No.
But Alvin Bragg wanted to take...
No.
Hold on. Alvin Bragg wanted to take his time, and so he did. And I still think Alvin Bragg...
He didn't take his time. The guy barely got there, Michael. He needed time to figure out if it was a legitimate case, okay? Bragg is in a different situation than DOJ. He moved more quickly. He's got his case on trial. A new DA is entitled to a year to figure out what case he's going to bring.
Not a case like this, especially when you have somebody with the qualifications of a Mark Pomerantz that spent a full year himself. You got to have trust in the people that are there.
As a matter of legal ethics, he can't rely on other people. He needs to assure himself.
Then let me rephrase it. Let me phrase it this way. Okay, let's give Alvin Bragg the pass. Cy Vance should have brought the case before he left. All right, how about that one? If everybody wanted to see that case, and again, when you have somebody of the likes of a Mark Pomerantz, say whatever you want, whether the book, this, or that, whatever it might be. When you have somebody with the skill set of a Mark Pomerantz, as far as I'm concerned, Cy Vance should not have wimped out. He should have definitively filed that action. And then
Here's what we know. That Alvin Bragg made his own judgment. He filed the case. It's been litigated heavily by Trump. Trump has lost everything in court. A
Yep.
lot of people said,
And you
"Oh,
got
they'll
to give him
this,"
credit for it. Yep.
and you got to give him credit for it. A year is not an unreasonable amount of time. It's not like Merrick Garland or the others who took longer. The upshot, everything was litigated in federal court. Trump dismissed his appeal.
That's right. Yep.
So, your insights about this case have been vindicated. The more important thing is to look forward. And as we do a look back and a look forward, look back to 23, look forward to 2024, I expect that there will be at least 2 cases. Let me give you the laydown of the calendar, okay, Michael?
Yes. That's why I have you here, Norm.
It's that, and we have become very good friends. You were the very first to warn me of all this, that Donald Trump was not. When I interviewed you right before you went to start serving your time, you stood up and did the right thing. You went to start serving your time in Otisville. I came to see you in New York, and when I was starting my impeachment work, and you showed me who Donald Trump really was. And one thing you said stuck with me, and it was the theme of 2023. It relates to this absolute immunity conversation we're having. It's going to be the biggest issue in the world in 2024. Like 2024 is going to be a historic year for the 3 millennia long history of democracy. You told me Donald Trump will never leave the White House voluntarily. Do not expect a peaceful transition of power. He is going to refuse to go if he loses. And that is still the issue, of course, that came to the fore. You helped me get ready. That's part of the debt of gratitude I have to you. You helped me get ready. That's why when I drafted, it's in my book. I write about you in my impeachment book, A Case for the American People, and I reveal for the first time we had 10 articles of impeachment. We only ended up using 2, but why? You inspired me to do 10, because you warned me, this guy is a dictator. And you were the first, Michael, you were the first full extent of Trump's danger to democracy, the first person who told me to my face. I went to talk to you about these hush money payments and 2016 election interference. By the way, we were ahead of the curve on that too, my friend. I wanted to put that in the impeachment. No, you warned me. He's Norm. If you take one thing away from this conversation, Donald Trump is not leaving the White House voluntarily. He's not going on his own. And of course, we had to have a failed insurrection to evict him. And now he wants to get back in there with absolute immunity and admitted dictatorial powers on day one. He says, I'm going to defy the rule of law. He said he's going to criminally prosecute his adversaries if they're doing well politically. And he's gonna revenge. He did a word cloud yesterday on Truth Social. Revenge was at the middle. Revenge and dictator. Like he's advertising it. It's crazy. Norm, you told me.
You may remember.
You told me. So 2024, just to finish, might be the year in which that's adjudicated. And that brings me to my big year-end Times rundown of the polls, the hidden secret that is dangerous for Donald Trump's political prospects in the 2023 polls. And it's a very important aspect, Michael, of the year in review, because it shows if you get that conviction, the American people will reject him. And I think there's going to be multiple trials. We're going to have the Bragg trial in March. I think we'll probably get the Smith trial with a 60 to 90 day delay, which is just enough time for Bragg to do his thing. I would allocate, then who knows what will happen in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. That's currently set for May. I think that's going to be kicked. We'll find out at the beginning of March. The judge has a scheduling conference. And then August, Fani Willis wants to go. And she said she could go earlier. She told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, well, I might go earlier. So I don't think Donald Trump is going to dodge those 4 trials, my friend.
Yeah. So, another thing that I had said to you when we first met was that Trump will try to create a civil war in order to stay in power. And it was crazy. I mean, some of the things that we talked about was so prescient. I mean, 4 years later, all of this is coming back to fruition. It's really crazy. But, I want to also bring up to you, because we're talking about the Supreme Court. I mean, you have people like Clarence Thomas, who should absolutely recuse himself for anything having to do with election fraud, because his wife Jeannie was an active participant in the insurrection. You think that Thomas will be forced to recuse himself? Or do you think that he's just going to stay in there and further tarnish the reputation of the court?
I think he's going to stay in there and tarnish the reputation of the court. On my MSNBC piece with brilliant younger colleague, Josh Kolb, who I do so much work with, I lay out the law that Thomas should be required to recuse. And there is a glimmer of hope, Michael, because he did recuse in an Eastman case. Eastman was his clerk, and the Eastman case came up another part of 2023. It was like a miracle. Clarence Thomas actually recused himself from the case because of a conflict. One. But we don't know, for example, in this Supreme Court order rejecting the Jack Smith leapfrog petition, which again, I'm not that stressed out about. It was a 1-line order in the court's docket. Did Clarence Thomas recuse himself from that order, or did he participate? With Ginny Thomas a central part of the events leading up to January 6th, calling Mark Meadows, calling on the states to, at least in Arizona, to use fake electoral certificates, a part of one of the organizations planning the Stop the Steal events, January 6th, present on January 6th at the Ellipse rally. How can her husband be adjudicating anything relating to January 6th? I mean, give me a break. So he should go. We lay out the law at MSNBC. We lay out the facts. We explain why Thomas should recuse himself. But Willie, I'm sorry to say, he's probably going to break the law yet again, as he's done with all of these illegitimate gifts.
And there's nothing that we can do. I mean, it's really, I'm a firm believer in term limits. I really am. I am 100% a believer that no one should have a job for life. Not a Supreme Court judge, certainly not a president of the United States, not even the federal court judges, right? Your members of Congress, right? Governors and so. I mean, this whole thing is insane to me. When you start hearing the longest serving member of Congress, he's there for 52 years. 52 years. I mean, what the fuck is that about? Seriously. I mean, 52 years. When our founding fathers first came up with the system of, having the representation, members of Congress, and so on, it was supposed to be a duty to those who were able to serve their fellow man, right? Their neighbor. And it was not supposed to be a job. It was more like jury duty, where it's an obligation. But because it's become so lucrative for so many of them, it's not just only become a job. Being a politician has become a profession. Now, you may have heard, and you and I have spoken offline about, I am considering a congressional run against Jerry Nadler. And I really do have to make the decision within the next 14 days and I have everything ready to go. I have my website ready to go. I have the whole thing ready to go. My platform is ready to go. I still just have not gotten the thumbs up from the wife because we've been beaten down by our system so badly. But Jerry Nadler will have been now in office literally 32 years. 32 years. Say to yourself as a New Yorker.
Effective. He's so effective up there, though, Michael.
My God.
He's one of the most
He's the
one
most
of the
ineffective for New York.
No, I've seen him up close. I got to tell you, I got to be straight with you. He is so focused, dedicated, hardworking. He uses his seniority. You know, I wrote about this in my book. When nobody else saw the threat of Trump, he was a leader of the Democratic caucus. We have to impeach him. So I think that there's pros and cons.
By the way, I got to stop you there, my brother, because he takes the credit for that. The guy who actually did it is Adam Schiff. In fact, Adam Schiff, absolutely 100% was behind the entire thing.
I'm not knocking Adam. No.
Yes.
I'm not knocking Adam. No, I'm not knocking Adam. Adam is wonderful. Okay, he's a friend. I'm supporting him in his race for the Senate. He was brilliant in how he handled. But long before Adam Schiff was ready to move to impeachment, Jerry Nadler saw the holistic threat that Donald Trump represented. So,
long before Jerry Nadler saw the threat, you know who saw it first? You and me. Me. That's who.
Well, Nadler was the one who...
Let me go one step further. You got these gigantic booms now going across the street with congestion pricing. You have migrants walking all over Manhattan. You have the streets falling apart here. He's so busy doing God knows what in Washington. Okay, the impeachment. How did that work out? Just like everything. You know what? I'm not going to argue with you because it's our end of the year. I was just making a point.
That's true. But Michael, people listen. Part of the reason people listen to the show is because the podcast is because you tell it like it is. And I think some of our better rated appearances, we get good ratings when you and I, people love to listen because we talk the same way as brothers that we do when nobody else is listening, right? Sometimes we agree. Sometimes we disagree.
Not supposed to agree
with mutual respect and love.
That's right.
No, it would be bullshit.
Right. So, all right. So let me move on away from, because I still think, I don't care what you say, Jerry Nadler is the most ineffective human being I've ever met. He's too old for the job.
The most effective I've seen.
Yeah. So let me ask you this.
So effective.
Yeah. Ineffective, I think you meant. But what about the Colorado ruling that keeps Trump off the ballot? I mean, that to me was a major, major surprise. That's also now headed to the Supreme Court. What's your take, Norm? What's your take on how it's going to go and why? And why
full
the
disclosure,
court?
Full disclosure, as you know, I'm the co-founder of Crew 20 years ago. And even though I stepped off the board when I went to do the impeachment, I still have the greatest love and respect for my Crew colleagues. I knew that they had the best chance of anybody in the country because they won the previous ruling against a January 6th insurrectionist, a New Mexico state official, Coy Griffin, pushing him out of office because he was in violation of the 14th Amendment. So they went down the block to Colorado and they just put on a stellar case at trial. And they won everything except for one issue at trial. And that was the trial judge made a bizarre legal ruling. Donald Trump is not covered by the 14th Amendment because it doesn't, when it says all federal officials, it doesn't cover come on.
Right.
And the Colorado Supreme Court rectified that and affirmed the rest of the trial court ruling and said, look, the 14th Amendment says insurrectionists may not serve in office. Donald Trump was clearly an insurrectionist. He encouraged that mob. He did nothing when they raged. And he, in fact, called out Mike Pence at 2:24 p.m. He put his own vice president's life in danger when he was there in the Capitol surrounded by out-of-control rioters. They were just starting to calm down, and then Trump caused them to explode again at 2:24. If you're an insurrectionist, it's like being 18 years old or being born in Germany. The 14th Amendment says you're not qualified, so you can't go on the ballot under Colorado law. Every state's law is different. Well, I think that they made the right decision. Now, here's the challenge. Nobody knows. The Supreme Court has never been presented with this question.
Nope.
Nobody knows what this Supreme Court will do. And, they have not exactly been favorable to Donald Trump in democracy cases. So I can't predict what they're going to do. Can you?
No. I have no idea. I do have to believe, despite the fact that the court system has not been good to me at all. Not from Judge William H. Pauley III, certainly not the Southern District of New York with Nick Roos or Tom McKay or Angie Griswold or Jeffrey Berman and Robert Kazami and all the animals that are over there. They have not been good to me. So do I think the Supreme Court is going to? I actually think that they will. I think that I don't know why. Maybe I'm more hopeful than I am optimistic. I don't know the answer. Or maybe I'm more optimistic than I am hopeful. I don't know how they're going to rule. But I wanted to morph that into a different question for a sec, Norm. Because obviously we know right now that Donald is facing 91 felony cases. 91. And of all of the cases against Trump, and we know that there are 4, possibly soon to be a 5th, which is the one that you think will bring him down first? Or which is the one that you think will just bring him down altogether? Do you think that there's any chance he walks away from all 91 felony counts?
1-2 punch. Alvin Bragg, 2016 election interference. Jack Smith, 2020 election interference. Those are the 2 cases. I think the Mar-a-Lago case is going to get pushed to later in 2024, maybe even 2025, I'm sorry to say. And then the Fani Willis case will also be devastating to him, but that may not start until August. So right now, but that'll be bad too. So let's say a 1-2-3 punch, Michael. 2016 state election interference case, 2020 federal election interference case, number 3, 2020 state interference case. So it's a 1-2-3 punch from state and federal prosecutors. That's the way our democracy should work. Giving the states and the feds the power to do this is part of the checks and balances that our founding fathers and constitutional framers and founding mothers, that the founders and the framers laid down. This is checks and balances in action, by the way, also including all the other cases, including the 14th Amendment. I write about them all in my New York Times piece, in my MSNBC piece, my 2 big end-of-year op-eds.
Well, then let me ask you this, because obviously once we hit 2024, right, we are heading into the election year. What are your best predictions? You think Trump will even be the Republican nominee? And if he's not, who do you think will be? And one last question on that. And will he or she, who do you think that they'll choose as their running mate? Like, who would Donald bring on right now as his running mate? And hypothetically, it's not going to be Donald. Maybe Nikki Haley ends up getting the nomination because Republicans smarten up. Who do you think that she would choose?
That is beyond my ken to do the running mate sweepstakes. I think if you force me to it, I think Trump is going to pick a young, dynamic, loyal,
Woman.
more historically centrist woman. You know who I'm thinking of? Stefanik.
Mm-hmm.
She used to be so normal.
Yeah.
So, she's demonstrated her absolute fealty to Donald Trump. I think Stefanik is the leader. I don't think Nikki Haley. She's been too critical of Trump, even pulling punches. And she's too independent. Trump doesn't want another Pence. He wants someone who will go to the death with him, go to the mat with him, who'll bring in a dictatorship. That's not Nikki Haley. So I think Stefanik, and that would be a very attractive ticket, Trump Stefanik. Make no mistake.
You know, can
Then
I ask you this? Can I just jump in for a second and ask you this? I mean, if I know Trump right now is, his domicile is Florida, but Donald Trump is a New Yorker. I'm not sure in our history if we've ever had a president and vice president from the same state. I think that turns off a lot of people in the Midwest.
Trump has switched to Florida, though. Trump has switched his domicile to Florida.
I understand, but he's a New Yorker. You can say whatever you want. Yeah, okay. He's domiciled now for tax purposes in Florida.
Nobody
but
cares.
Donald has always
Nobody
been known
cares.
as a New Yorker. A New York vice
The
president and a New York president?
The political experts, I'm just a lawyer who plays one, right? I've been doing politics, like as a lawyer in the political arena for decades, so I can pretend. Like when they put me on these panels on CNN, and sometimes there's a political question, I'm there to be the lawyer, but I'll weigh in on the politics. That geographic effect, indeed the whole vice presidential effect, is overstated. People really decide based on the top of the ticket. Nevertheless, I think the geography is really irrelevant, say the professionals and the pollsters and the other experts. I think that the Stefanik-Trump pairing will be powerful, not because Stefanik is important, because she puts him in a good light. That, it's like a setting for a stolen diamond. In his case, he's a cubic zirconium. He's pretending to be running on American principles. He's a fake and a phony. Okay, the guy's a dictator. He's anti-American.
Yeah. So, Norm, let me ask you this then. And when I say they, I'm referring to the GOP. They're trying to paint Joe Biden as feeble and ineffective. Now, I say this all the time. The one thing I will acknowledge is Joe Biden is old, right? I mean, for standards, he's, he happens, but he's not feeble, nor is he ineffective.
No.
So how as Democrats, how should Jamie Harrison, the head of the DNC, how should they best combat this misinformation campaign that is being lodged against Joe? How could Joe Biden just sit back and do nothing? What do they all need to do? They can't rely on Michael Cohen 24/7. They can't rely on Norm Eisen. They can't rely on the Mycelis brothers with the MeidasTouch Network or Lincoln Project and so on. What are they going to do to best combat this misinformation campaign being promoted by the GOP and Donald?
Well, first of all, I think the press has to be much more candid. The style of reporting, the kind of both sides now style of reporting.
Mm-hmm. If you want to call it that.
Who's that song? I've looked at life from both sides now. Is that Joni Mitchell? Is that
wrong generation, brother?
That's our generation. Michael. I've looked at life from both sides now. I've looked at presidential candidates from both sides. No, that won't work at all. We've got Joni Mitchell. I was right. They say your first guesses are often your
they always tell you that on these standardized tests. Right.
That's how I did so well on all those standardized tests. You think I got into Harvard Law School on my good looks?
No.
By the way, neither did I. The both sidesism doesn't work. There's a very solemn press responsibility. Number two, and we're seeing this with the Republican voices, conservative voices like my friend Judge Mike Ludig. We need conservatives to step forward. People will listen to conservatives. Bill Kristol is another great champion, and there have been hundreds of them.
Big fan.
Olivia Troy. I'm on TV with Olivia Troy all the time. The conservatives have to step forward, and we need Bill Barr. I hate him. And I hate him for what he did to Michael Cohen. Okay, that was a Bill Barr special, I believe.
Yep.
But Bill Barr has stepped forward and been very critical. John Bolton. You think I have anything in common with John Bolton, Michael?
You know,
but John Bolton has
I bumped into him 2 weeks ago over at the Regency. Yeah. But you know what? Can we talk about Bill Barr for one quick second since you brought him up? How come? So Bill Barr, what, by saying, I told Donald you lost the election? As far as I'm concerned, you haven't even scratched the surface of making your way back into polite society. I don't see Bill Barr. Why? Because he goes on CNN and he sits with whether it's Caitlin Collins or any of the other, hosts there and turns around and he's critical of Trump. Fuck you, Bill Barr. Let me be very clear about that. Fuck you. You get up before Congress like I did 7 times and you spill the beans on what you did for Donald to people like me. An unfucking constitutional remand back to prison. Not me saying it, Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein. And you know what? God willing, I'm going to be successful in this case that was just brought before the Second Circuit, the Court of Appeals, on my Michael Cohen versus United States of America, Trump, Bill Barr et al. All right? If that goes back, damn straight, I want to depose Bill Barr. And I want the goddamn truth from him because that's how democracy gets saved. Not by him coming on the shows and saying, oh, I told Donald you lost the election. Oh. Come on.
Well, I carry no brief for Bill Barr, Michael. I truly don't. I shouldn't have mentioned him because I know what he did to you, I believe is terribly wrong. I've gone on the record, okay? Yeah. I wrote with your lawyer, brilliant lawyer, Tanya Perry. Wow, she's so good. We wrote the afterword to your book.
What are you talking about? You also wrote a letter regarding a pardon application that I'm going to be submitting in January. Yeah.
I think that Trump and Barr did a terrible, terrible thing. But still, I'm going to, it's another one of our friendly disagreements. What Bill Barr is doing is very valuable. Look, another one? Oh, my God, I can't leave him out. Trump's special counsel. I was special counsel to Obama. There's like a club of the special counsels. Trump's special counsel, Ty Cobb, he's come out and denounced this turn to dictatorship. Okay? So I think that we need more of that, and that's what it's going to take. Mitch McConnell, the leaders who are in Congress need to be more outspoken. McConnell made a mistake in not voting. They got 7 votes. They could have, if they got a few more votes, they could have permanently impeached and barred Donald Trump in the second impeachment. McConnell made a mistake in not supporting that. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to need those elected leaders as well, Michael.
Hey, Norm, since we're talking about people who have some of them, your estimation, not so much in mine, but who have come forward and denounced Donald Trump for his behavior, his actions, his anti-Constitution, behavior. What about Rudy Colludi, drunken Giuliani, right? I mean, how do you predict? I mean, he should be out there front and center. How do you predict that America's former mayor is going to ultimately fare? Because when all is said and done, he's got a RICO case coming in Georgia, as well as various felony cases pending in at least 4 different courts, just like Donald. I mean, do you think that he's going to do time? You think he'll try to make some sort of a blanket deal in order to do something? I mean, he's not a young man. Financially now he's broke, right? What does he have to gain other than to sit, to wait, cross his fingers, hope Donald wins, and then the best part about
That's the play.
Is, and then hope that Donald's going to even pardon him. Donald could be very pissed at him.
Yeah. But Giuliani is playing the Trump game, which is delay. That's also the Giuliani game, Michael.
Yep.
And here's what he's doing. He's trying to delay. He's using bankruptcy to delay paying that judgment.
He couldn't pay that judgment even if he didn't file for bankruptcy.
He can't. He's out of money. Okay, the guy's going to be living in somebody's. He's in full delay mode, bankruptcy. He's dragging his feet as much as possible on the criminal cases. He's been very defiant. What he's hoping for is a gamble. He's hoping for a pardon from Donald, the embrace of Donald. His only way he's going to get money now is if Donald and his supporters say, oh, okay, I'm going to throw you a bone, right? Maybe give him a place to live, whatever. And, he's not a young man. So if he dies, all of the problems are erased. So he's also saying, well, I'm trying to arbitrage my remaining years. It's a lousy way to live. But the one thing he can say, and he gets the emotional boost of the love. And, look at how popular your podcast is. You get a lot of people who are grateful to you. There are people who are grateful to Giuliani, the Trump followers, who say, thank you for not conceding, right? So he gets the psychic boost of staying in Trump's camp. I agree with you. Trump thinks Trump's a sociopath. He'll think nothing of pushing Giuliani
do you think he's going to give him free lodging and food at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, he could have.
Not a chance.
Giuliani's an unindicted co-conspirator in that Jack Smith case, so he's not off. Those are 5-year statutes of limitations federally. Giuliani's not off the hook.
No. So, Norm, let me then ask you this.
He would like that pardon from Trump for the federal offenses.
Absolutely, but there's still state offenses too. So let me ask you this then, right? What do you think that we can look forward to over the next year? I mean, do you see any big surprises in the horizon? Or do you think it's just going to ultimately come down to Trump versus Biden 2? The rematch.
No, you can never predict. 2 years ago, who would have predicted we'd have 2 hot wars now, one in Ukraine, one in Israel? You can never predict international or domestic events. I think that our domestic next year is going to be important elections all over the world, not just in the United States, but the United States. In democracies all over the planet, there are going to be elections, big EU elections. The conservatives, the isolationists, the Putinites are going to run for control of the EU institutions or more power there. We've got a big election in India, the world's largest democracy. All over the world, there's going to be important elections. The highlight is the U.S. I think we're going to see the Alvin Bragg 2016 election interference case is going to go to trial in March, starting March 25th. I think you're going to see Trump's going to be convicted. I think he's going to face jail time there. Going to write about that in the new year. Then Trump is going to go to trial in the Jack Smith case a couple months after that. April, May, June, that window, second conviction. And those convictions, as I just wrote in the Times, are going to drag him. The American people do not want a convicted criminal. Biden is going to win by a large enough margin. I'm very anxious about the third parties, but I think the margin is going to be large enough because Trump is going to take such a hit. And, democracy will, I'm optimistic, likely survive, but no one knows for sure. And Michael, if I may end the podcast and end the year by saying that's why personally we agree on some things, you and I, we disagree on others. But as I look at the end of 2023, I'm very grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for the message. I'm grateful for the message you send about Trump's liability, about who he is. You have been one of the most outspoken. You were the first to tell me. And I appreciate you for that, Michael, as we head into this very consequential 2024.
But I also want to say to you, I've also received no benefit, believe it or not. And the only benefit that I get is knowing that I'm going to, God willing, help democracy and America survive the dictatorial wannabes of an autocrat and the problems that this world will suffer as a result. But you know what my real true hope is? I hope that I don't have to even be a part of the Alvin Bragg case. I hope that
Yeah.
even though I've been subpoenaed to testify, I hope that they don't need me. It's really a documents case more than anything. Let somebody else put their ass on the line. Norm, I can't even finish with my supervised release despite over 700 hours of work credits. I couldn't get that. Over 7 different congressional committees, the Mueller report, right? Grand juries being, the witness over at the grand jury, at the trial for the New York Attorney General case. And all I get from it, believe it or not, and and I'm so thankful for my mea culpa supporters, for my political beatdown brigaders. I get it. But Norm, nobody's really out there protecting me. And when I say that, I'm talking about Alvin Bragg. I'm talking about his team. None of them, they don't worry about what happens to me and to my family. And it's wrong. And I do hope that they can do it without me, because I'm not excited. I am really not. I'm not excited to be a participant.
Michael, it's true you're doing it not for any benefit to you. Indeed, quite the opposite. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. That's the definition of American patriotism. It's the definition of being a mensch. And that is why I'm so proud to call you my friend. I wish you a happy new year. I wish all the listeners to the podcast and the watchers a happy new year. Thanks for having me again, Michael.
Norm, thank you. You're the best. Appreciate you and my friendship with you and everything that you've done.